All right, so this is Divine Sew again, with some instructions on how I assemble my Lone Star diamonds. I hope you can see this. I'm going to try to adjust the camera just a tiny bit more. So this is my ironing station. And so as you can see, I have my diamonds with the stitch seam lines. There's 6 of them here aligned. Normally you have 8, but I've already finished 2. So I have them all aligned in a certain direction. So I have the sewn piece laying on top. My yellow corners, again, because that's my center, always to the left. My upper outside corner facing to the right. Okay, I'm going to put these aside. I'm going to grab one of these strips. So I'm going to grab it very gently. I'm not tucking and pulling, I'm just lifting it. And then what we're going to do is I'm aligning this edge even with my edge of my ironing table. Okay. And I actually have a custom ironing table that I built myself. It's actually on top of a old school desk that I added a top to it and turned it into my ironing table. So as you can see here, this is where we just stitched the seams. So I'm going to grab my iron, and I have I don't know if you can see that, but there's the Rorita Perfect steamer. It has a separate reservoir for the water and the steam, and it has a cord that the steam travels through. So absolutely love this iron. The bottom is, you know, a little scratched up, but I used this non-stop for a lot of years, and it's got all the little holes for the steam to travel through. A nice even sole. Okay, no steam right now. All I'm doing is just pressing down. I'm not pulling, I'm just pressing down on the seam to warm it up. Okay, and I have mine on a cotton steam setting. Okay, this is nice and lined up. So now I'm gonna put my fingers underneath here. I'm not pulling and stretching. I'm just gonna tip this up and over forward, tipping the seam away from me, or the strip piece that we sewn on. I'm tipping it away from me, and I'm very gently gonna go along as I'm tipping this away. I'm not pulling and stretching, but I am finger pressing very gently, no pulling, just finger pressing the seam down and away towards the back of my ironing board. Okay, gonna go along this whole seam here very gently, just pressing this away. And you can see here those tips are starting to line up really, really nicely. And that's because we glue basted them. We didn't tuck and pull on anything. And if you're sewing your first set of strips together perfectly with a 1/4 inch seam, your pieces would have measured exactly 2 inches, and then they were subcut. But as long as your seams are accurate, these intersections, and you shouldn't have to lot of stretch and pull these little diamond pieces to make them to fit. And you can see by the steps we took earlier on that these intersections, the seams are nice and flat, even these intersections, but they're matching very, very nicely. Okay, so now that we've done this, I'm going to move it down a little bit. Maybe you get a little more in the camera here. Okay, so now that I pressed this down, I don't tuck and pull. Just take my iron again, and I'm just going to press down and use my steam. Press down, steam. Press down, a little bit of steam. Okay. And I just gently move it this way. I don't pull and stretch. I just mainly press down. The seam is nice and flat because I kind of aligned it very gently when we did the first ironing step. Now if I flip this over, backside's right, neat and tidy. Everything is lining up, seams are lining up, seams are pressed mostly to the right side. You will notice that once in a while I had a seam like right here on these light pieces. You see the seams going to the, I don't know if you can see that, but on the light pieces the seam is going this way, and that's because I pressed it to the dark side of the fabric, because this is really light and I didn't want any shadow effect on there. Okay, So if you want to, at this point, you can just go along with your iron and you can just give it a little bit of a very light press on the back side. Not necessary, but you can. Okay. So I take this and I leave it like that. I put it aside. Take the next piece and we're going to repeat the process. Okay, so again, you see my light tips over here to my left, dark tip to the right. Lay it down, align this with this edge of your ironing board. I did use a little steam by accident here, but I just kind of pressed this down to set the seam. Not starching, not doing anything fancy, and I'm just going to tip this very gently up and away from me. And right here, you want to make sure you're not pulling that way, because then you're going to stretch these edges. Okay, just let it, just very gently move the fabric over and let it fall into place right along that seam line. Give these seams a little bit of a tiny little press towards, away from you. And all that is just to give it the initial good section. And you can see without any struggles how nicely these seams line up. Press. And then I just give it a little minute or two to cool down before I touch it. Very gently lift it up. Move it on top of the other finished pressed piece, and you're going to carry on until the same process, until you're all the way done with all your 6 pieces, or 8, depending on what you're doing. Typically 8. Okay. You're working on a bias edge here, so you don't want to stretch this. You just want to gently push it away, press it down, make sure you've pressing the seam one direction. And you can see I'm not pushing it. I'm just pushing down on it and giving that steam and let it set. I'm not moving the iron. If I do, it's actually if you see me moving the iron, it's lifted off the board ever so slightly. So I'm not actually pulling the fabric at all. Lift up, move it away. Next piece. Okay, flip it open. This technique will work for bargello quilts and all that kind of stuff anytime when you have these weird angle intersections. But I'm super happy with this iron. It's not your inexpensive iron. You can buy these through Amazon and or some of the other retail outlets that might carry Rowita irons. So just gonna let this settle down a bit, flip it forward. Yeah, this part here is really important. This part here is so important that you don't pull it that way. You just, I'd be very careful with that. Other than that, these center seams are not as sensitive. I'm just pushing to make sure that seam just a little bit, just putting a little gentle force to get this seam to nestle down nicely. As you can see, I don't have to undo any seams whatsoever. And because of the glue basting we did in the other video, everything lines up really, really nicely. One more to go. Okay. Same process. Heat it up, pull it back. Kind of becomes a little bit repetitive as you do in this. No stretching. Just, you know, you just see these intersection lines up perfectly nicely. Okay. See. So this is four rows. You kind of keep repeating all the same processes as in the 3 videos I've done. The lining up with the strips, glue basting the seams, then the sewing part, and then the ironing part. So now these are back, ready to go back to my assembly table. And we're going to repeat the process again to mark our 1/4 inch seam sides, seam intersections, align it with the next strip set that we got to sew onto these diamonds, and repeat the sewing and ironing process. I hope you enjoyed that video. Press like and subscribe. Thank you very much for watching.